I thought it was 2014 that I started learning Unity. So I've been doing Unity for nearly 2 years. That's interesting. It's interesting that like I've been doing this, but I don't even know my own, what I actually studied. So yeah, sorry, 2013 I was going to a lot of open days and putting a lot of thought into what I'll be doing. Here you can even see I've got a list of financial goals for 2014 when I plan to study full time. So I was already planning very early on to study full time in 2014 if that meant that I'd go to a formal institution, or if I would go to a or if I'll go to a formal institution, or if I'll study self-directed like I'd been doing full time. So I'd stop working and I'd just study at home, which isn't a very nice thing to do. It can get very lonely studying at home by yourself. So we finally got up to 1,000 hours. I had a massive thing for, I still do, I have a massive thing for old school Nintendo based games like Mario and how they did their collision detection. So yeah, I passed 1,000 hours. So over 2 years. Took me up to 1,000 hours. It only took me a year to get up to 2,000 hours because because I started studying full time. Did it? 2000. So I hit. I'm sorry. Yeah, mid 2013. So a year and a half. A lot of this stuff here, like that laptop just before, and this is me planning on and getting things throughout 2013 for 2014. There I am with my grandparents. Homestuck stuff. This is a big deal. I was reading her Apprenticeship's Indie Bits blog because I decided to read it from like first entry to most current entry as a way to kind of like set coursework for myself. So I would read like as much as I could within an hour, and I got her attention, and I eventually met her at PAX 2013, which was kind of a big deal. This is interesting. IT Open Day. There should be a Swinburne Open Day in here too. So I feel like I've come to a decision with university, if any, that I will attend, and I've chosen Swinburne for whatever reason. So this was on the 8th of 2013. I didn't eventually go to Swinburne. Probably shouldn't have. Probably a lot of other better places I could have gone. I was doing the certificate for because I couldn't get into the degree programs, and I don't really want to talk about it right now. It was terrible experience, but it gave me the opportunity to settle into Melbourne, into a new home, and now next year I'm going to be studying at AIE. I still don't believe in formal institutions, but you can't just study for 10,000 hours. There are inherent opportunities that come out of meeting other people, and that make successful people successful. It's not just IQ, and it's not just the amount of time you spend. So we're not even up to 2014. I'm just going to skip through a lot of this stuff. So 2014. So we'll just skip all the way through 2014. a lot of things happened, but let's get there. And we're back to the start. So there is a lot of stuff in my journal. There's a lot of stories. There's a lot of personal stuff. For example, there was a large period that I was going through depression. Now, I still do go through depression. I still suffer depression. But there was a large period where I posted a lot about that. That's an interesting thing. There's another interesting thing where I nearly broke up with my missus, and there's not much in there about that, but I do touch lightly on that. There's also my challenges with formal institution and all of that type of stuff. So a lot of personal stuff, as well as a lot of study stuff. So it shows everything I've been studying and how I've got from where I started to where I am now, which you can compound it, you can compress it down into like simple things like I've read game design books, I've learned a lot about programming, I've studied Unity, I've now studied 3ds Max, and now I'm studying UE4. I did a lot of stuff in processing. I read a lot of books. I read a lot about physics. So you can compress it down, but it's taking me like 3 years to learn a lot of that type of stuff, and it's all in my journal, and it really gives you the sense that it does take time to learn things. My cat now wants to go outside. But so that's kind of who I am and what I do. Going from like full-time work to full-time study did cause a massive problem in the way I recorded my journal entries. Because I'd go home and I'd set like a set time from 4 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. And I counted those hours and I'd study in these fixed periods. But when I went to a formal institution, then class timetables changed all the time, and for the first semester, I counted the hours for most of my classes I did at Swinburne. But for the second semester, I decided not to count a lot of the units in my studies because they were just completely and utterly irrelevant. There's other little facets of my journal. So, for example, we can go all the way back down. Now, this has gone for 22 minutes. My apologies if you didn't want to watch this much. I hope that it's been interesting. Interesting things about my journal. I didn't always post in this format with counting hours. That's something that I've had to go through and re-edit my journal. But I think since about 500 hours, I've kept pretty consistent. Also, you can see, take note how there's no breaks in the text, but in here, I'd have these headers. So class, study, so I'll kind of break things up a little bit more. And then eventually, up in here, I started breaking things up into the pieces of coursework. So the Art of Game Design so here's Swinburne Interactive Animation, Swinburne HTML, so Chris Crawford on Game Design stuff. So these headers kind of represented pieces of coursework I was doing, and now I actually count hours with plus symbols, so that's plus 3D, so that's 2 hours to 3ds Max. And you'll see a lot of things don't have pluses, and that's because for projects I don't count hours, and that's a separate story that I don't think is worth going into right now. But there's a lot of stuff that I don't count hours for, so you can see 3ds Max. I must have only been doing 3ds Max stuff. Usually I do about 3 to 4 pieces of coursework. At the moment I'm doing UE4 usually 2 hours a day, Fmod usually 1 hour a day, a portfolio piece which I count hours for, usually 2 hours, and ZBrush 2 hours, and I also have a project that I'm working on, Crystal Core project with Vector, and I usually do about 2 hours. Now that's 2, 4, 6, 8, 9 hours a day that I do. Now I usually don't get a lot of that stuff done. Today I only did 1 hour of UE4, 2 hours of my portfolio piece, 2 hours of ZBrush, and 2 hours of Crystal Core. I think 2, 4, 6, 7. Yeah, that sounds right. So yeah, now with my journal entries, I'd usually post the whole thing in one journal entry. So I would have the one journal entry with it split up into the different pieces of coursework, and then I'd post things about those, or projects, or other ramblings I had. So sometimes I'd talk about things I went to, or friends. But nowadays, or just recently actually, you can tell by the scroll bar, I started posting things properly using Tumblr. So I split things up into their own separate posts, and then at the end of the day, I'll post one journal entry counting the hours and any other little things I have to write down as well. So not all the time will I post separate pieces of coursework for separate posts. Most of the time I'll use this last post for that day to record any other things. So you can see plus 1 hour to FL Studio, plus 3 hours to my portfolio piece. God, I must have been on a roll that day. And even though I do 2 hours of Crystal Core project, I don't count projects or work in my my hour count, plus 1 hour to After Effects, and then that all gets recorded into this final header up here. So there's the interview at AIE. So it's been kind of an evolution of how I've studied, but the basic principle has stayed the same. So I still count hours. I still keep it formal. Whenever I study, it is study time. It is my time to study, and if anyone interrupts that, I get very upset. When I'm on campus, I am picky about what I count as hours and what I don't. I don't know how I'm going to deal with it at AIE. There'll probably be a different story. Yeah. So yeah, that's usually not the story I tell most people. Usually the story I tell most people is a lot compressed and a lot smaller, but and usually doesn't go on for half an hour. But that should give my followers, which Tumblr is such an important thing for me, and my followers are kind of a big deal to me, even though I've got such a small amount of followers compared to a lot of other people. I feel like a small subset of those have been following me long enough to understand who I am and what I do, and I don't have to explain or give excuses or give reasons to those people. So anyway, I'm going to leave it there, and I won't push it over 30 minutes. And if you've watched this whole thing, thank you. That's pretty impressive. I'm pretty impressed that anyone actually reads my journal when they tell me that they read it, or most people just look at the pictures. My mum reads my journal, although she doesn't understand half of it, but I think she likes the pretty pictures too. Okay.